Here we go, pressing the button now. Good evening again. This is the second of our double header of shows today. And if my maths, depending on whether you're American or British, is correct, this is my 100th live stream, which is something of an achievement, given that we've been doing it for 7 months or something. Sometimes it feels like I've done 5 million of them, but it's 100, I think. So joining me tonight is an old friend. He's Torben, me and Normandy, we've been mates a long time. Brian Domitrovich, you may remember him from such earlier World War II TV performances as the machine gun panel debate that went on for interminably long, talking about machine guns. But we're talking about a battle tonight. So good evening, or rather from where you are, good afternoon, Brian.
How you doing, Paul?
I am absolutely very excited about this. So we are going off to the Pacific, to Guadalcanal for this, Brian, and for those watching. So I'm just going to talk from a kind of British point of view. My big problem with the Pacific campaign is placing it all on a bloody map, because I know Europe, I know because I live there. It's that Pacific thing, and you mentioned the Solomon Islands and the Marshall Islands. I just have to, every time I have to kind of look them up on a map and go, ah, yeah, those ones. So let's start with a kind of a basic. I've got photos. We'll look at the Pacific there, and I'll point out where Guadalcanal is. And so for those watching, it's there just to the north east of Australia. And Brian, why the hell is Guadalcanal important to the Allies in 1942?
So everybody knows the December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor is attacked. There is across the international date line, there are simultaneous attacks that are taking place on Hong Kong, the Philippines, and the Japanese are just really taking over. And as you can see from that map there, the Japanese have put together what is essentially the largest territorial empire in human history. It's not a lot of landmass, but in terms of territory, it is the largest. And they are defeating everybody that they go up against. They've defeated the Americans, they've defeated the British, they've defeated the Dutch. And really, it was shocking to a lot of people. And as you can see there on that line, you see that August 42 line, and that's really where it leads to. You see in June, May of 42, you see those expansions in August 42. And I think one of the points that I wanted to make early on is, in a lot of more historical, more contemporary concepts, is that Midway is the turning point for the battle in the PTO. In my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, it is not the turning point, because as you can see, the Battle of Midway takes place in June of 42. Up there, you can see the mark right up there. And they are still making territorial conquest in New Guinea, up into the Alaskan territorial regions. So Midway really hasn't set them back that much. They've set them back in terms of a navy, but in terms of their land conquest, they're still pushing. And finally, in May, they actually land on the island of Tulagi, which is the Solomon Islands is a British territory. The capital is Tulagi. Tulagi is about 30 miles north of the island of Guadalcanal. And what ends up happening is that the Japanese, while they're there, they kind of fan out and they land on the island of Guadalcanal and notice that there is a very nice flat piece of terrain that looks pretty good for an airfield. And they start construction of an airfield. And the Americans, along with the Australian Coast Watchers Network, get word that this airfield is being built. And as you can see, the Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal, it really then cuts off Australia as a lifeline.
Yeah.
Early in the war planning, we were intending to use Australia as we almost used England in Europe. And if that lifeline is severed, there's a huge problem there. And so we decide that an offensive needs to take place, and we then send the 1st Marine Division to take care of that job for us.
I mean, it's got a little bit of a Malta connection, isn't it? In the Mediterranean, same time of year, 1942. In the way of a lifeline. So it's and that's. I know there are people watching that who know these basics, but for me, it's important we just kind of establish that premise right at the beginning of why it's all about. And I'm not a big expert in the Pacific, and I have to confess I kind of do consider Midway a turning point, but that's maybe because, as I say, I'm thinking about the naval side of it, because that's what I can relate to. And then one of the things I want to point out to our audience is that unlike a lot of people who read about the Pacific, you've actually been to these islands. Because of your work, you get to travel to the Far East, you've been to these places, and so you have a much better sense of just the terrain, the geography, and the distances as well. That us looking at these maps, it's very hard to get that sense of place. And so that's why you're on the show, because you've been to these places and you've established connections with some of the locals there and tour guides and experts. And as people who are regular viewers know, I don't just use the PhD historians and the big ones who write the books and appear on TV. I use the amateurs who are in many ways as better, and in some cases better on their subjects than these big people. So that's the context. So moving on, take us through the Japanese side of it first. Let's talk about well, I'll let you lead it the way you want to leave it, but the Japanese side and the American side, and of course also we're going to address the fact that the battle we're going to cover has about 7 different labels it gets given, which is interesting in its own right. Alligator Creek, I called it on the graphic, but there's other ones, Ilu River, Hell, blah blah blah. So we'll go through that. So where do you want to leap off from with your next point, please, Brian?
Well, I think that going back to what you were talking about real quick is that there's always this kind of Wikipedia level version of history where everybody thinks that, hey, the Americans were of this Europe first mindset, and we'll deal with the Japanese later. We got to take care of everything in Europe. And as the reports and some of these officers are reporting back to the Americans, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Washington, D.C., they're reporting back and saying, hey, look, these guys are for real. They are very, very violent. They are very well put together. A lot of people don't realize that the Japanese were actually on the winning side of World War I. They got to reap a lot of benefits from being on the winning side of World War I. And they take those interwar years and they hone their skills, especially naval night tactics, using of aircraft carriers. They get very, very good, but they're kind of pushed to the side. It's like you're okay, you're the B team. And finally, once the word gets through and they're to be taken seriously, that's where we go, okay, you know what? We got to focus on these guys, because if not, it may be too late. They may take Hawaii. The West Coast may be threatened.
I mean, just quickly, I had this on a show last week with Professor Frank McDonough, who wrote his book, The Hitler Years, is that we think of the Allies, and we know there's a little bit of a fractured command, Eisenhower, MacArthur, Monty, all that lot. But the Axis, as we call it, the Japanese don't tend to tell the Germans what they're doing. The Germans don't tell the Japanese what they're doing. No one tells the Italians. And so our focus as Western people interested in the battles is so often on the European side of things and the Germans, because we have that stream of information coming our way. And the Japanese, as you say, are treated as a completely separate entity, and it's to our shame in some ways that we don't look at it with as much interest as we do the ETO. But anyway, I will let you continue.
No, that's a fantastic point. Again, and this is I think it's more and more coming to mainstream historical circles.
Yeah.
But the main character that we focus on with this is Colonel Ichiki. I don't know if you have his picture up there.
There we go. Yeah.
So yeah, there he is. And Colonel Ichiki is in command of the 28th Regiment, and he is your typical. If you were to think of a Japanese officer in early World War II, this is your guy. He's very arrogant, very cocky. Thinks that he can win the war by himself, and his unit is actually slated to be the shock troops, the first landing assault wave during the Battle of Midway. So the troops that are going to land on Midway is going to be the 28th. Obviously, Midway doesn't turn out as well as they thought it was going to, so they have to turn Ichiki around. Then, obviously, August 7th, they utilize the 28th to go and retake Guadalcanal. And the reason why they want to use the 28th is for two reasons. One, they are a very, very good regiment. And two, they don't want them coming back. And now all of a sudden people are going, hey, Ichiki, what are you guys doing here? Why aren't you guys at Midway? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we didn't win. We lost. They don't want
hail the conquering heroes. So, yeah, exactly.
Right, right. So they don't want them coming back. And so Ichiki's almost thrust into the spotlight early on, actually. As a matter of fact, he's part of what's called the Marco Polo Bridge incident. This occurs in July of 1937. And a lot of more, I guess, historians that look at the war as a whole, both from the Pacific and the Europe, kind of, instead of that September 1939 being the beginning of World War II, they look at this as actually being the official start date of the war as a whole. So Ichiki is now being thrust to go retake Guadalcanal, and what ends up happening is on August 7th, 1942, this is where the Marines land on Guadalcanal. They actually they land on the islands of Tulagi, Gavutu and Tanambogo, the Florida Islands, and also Guadalcanal. If you have that map, there's a
that one.
Yeah, beautiful. So this is an outline. Down at the bottom of the picture is the island of Guadalcanal. It's roughly about 90 miles long, 20 miles wide. And above there, you see Tulagi Island and Gavutu Island, and there's an even smaller island there called Tanambogo. And it's here on August 7th. And actually, the road to Tokyo begins on those islands. Those are the first landing islands that take place roughly on August 7th, around 7 a.m. And the landings on Guadalcanal really don't take place until the 9 a.m. timeframe. And on Guadalcanal is really construction troops, people that are building the airfield. They're Korean conscripts. They're not fighting troops. You have a little bit more of a contingent on Tulagi and Gavutu and Tanambogo. And there's an incident actually that happens on Tanambogo early on where the Japanese are kind of hunkered in on Tanambogo. And Tanambogo, to give European viewers a little bit that maybe understand the Battle of Normandy or have been to, say, St. Mary-Église, is probably half the size of the St. Mary-Église square there. It is tiny. And we are hitting that with destroyers, a battalion size. This is where Marine Raiders and Paramarines are fighting on these islands. And we attack Tanambogo with a few tanks. And on the island of Tanambogo are mechanics, essentially. They're airplane mechanics. A Stuart tank lands on Tanambogo, and these mechanics come out with metal bars and gasoline, Molotov cocktails. And at one point, they jam these metal bars in to disable the tank. They douse the tank in gasoline, they light it on fire, and they drag these tank drivers out and beat them to death and light them on fire. These are their mechanics. And Marine commanders and Marines are looking at this going, I mean, they're just dumbfounded. They're absolutely dumbfounded of the ferocity of what they're experiencing. And this is really going to set the stage. Now, what the one thing too I want to point out real quick is, for the people that are watching and the people that will watch this, is that you have to look at this battle through the lens of 1942. You cannot look through this battle through the lens of 1945 and beyond, because talking about this, everybody's kind of going, well, yeah, we knew the Japanese did this. You know, it's in history books, the ferocity of them. We didn't know this in August of 1942. We did not know the fanaticism that we were facing on those islands. They are learning it firsthand.
Yeah. Well, the American military is going through exactly the same process a bit later in the war than the British did earlier, in assuming that the World War II in the European theater would be kind of fought like the old wars, and we hadn't anticipated the SS murdering our guys up near Dunkirk and things like that. So the learning curve of it, realizing it's not going to be cricket this time, it's going to be a little bit tougher. And, you know, whenever the Pacific comes up, like the Eastern Front has come up on my shows, and Mikhail in Stalingrad told us, oh, there's thousands of mass graves here in Stalingrad. You know, the scale of things, the barbary, the savagery needs to be bashed home again, because we have this European theatre of operations sensibilities of kind of the niceties. And although there's some atrocities in Normandy, they are by far the exception, not the rule. There's this sportingness, there's the prisoners there, there's the prisoners there. And it's important to kind of establish right at the beginning that Guadalcanal sets the stage violently, immediately, for a very, very violent and bloody and savage campaign. And you know, we could touch on the Pacific series, and we won't, you know, but I think that the popularity of that series didn't compare with Band of Brothers because of the savagery, because of just the what it did to the men who were out there on both sides. And there's not much of a joyful viewing. You don't get, like you do with Band of Brothers, the reunions and the liberations and the grateful civilians, and the Pacific starts almost as it ends with epic awful violence. Anyway, I'm just throwing it in there, but you know, let's get back to Guadalcanal.
Yeah, no, you hit it right on the head right there, because again, we have a lot of these discussions always kind of come up where people are always tend to gravitate towards Band of Brothers, and when people talk about the Pacific, they go, I didn't like it as much, and I think because of that, just the sheer violence and the magnitude of it that is taking place in the Pacific. Not to say that it's not happening in the ETO, but here again, like you said, you don't have these, you know, French civilians coming out with champagne and bread and everything. It's kind of, okay, we got to go to this island. We have to kill everybody, every sense of the word of the enemy on this island. Okay, we're done there. All right, let's go to the next island. Let's do it there, and then the next one, and then the next one. But Guadalcanal sets the stage, and early in the campaign, it is kind of nice if people read Robert Leckie's book, Helmet for My Pillow. He discusses the good days early on, where they have canned crab food that they have taken from the Japanese, beer, sake, wine. It's kind of nice because the Marines land there and thinking that they are going to have essentially in their minds this Saving Private Ryan style landing in their heads, and they really walk ashore without a shot being fired, really. And for the first few weeks, they don't know if there's any even Japanese on the island. They start getting into some skirmishes, but they know, and some of the war planners know that the counterattack is coming, and this is where Colonel Ichiki starts, and they actually send. There is a naval engagement, the Battle of Savo Island, that takes place on August 9th, and the the American Navy is basically destroyed. A lot of the destroyers. There's some Australian ships involved as well, and the Navy essentially says, hey, we've already lost the carrier at Coral Sea. We've already lost the carrier at Midway. Later, and they head for home, and they head for open waters and really leave the Marines stranded on Guadalcanal. So it's whatever they've pulled off the ships is what they have. Now, the one good thing that they've done is that they have combat loaded those ships. So in New Zealand, they said, hey, we're going to combat load these ships. So we're going to bring off essentials, ammo, medical supplies, weaponry. That's going to be off first. We'll worry about our other stuff later. Good thing that they did, because a lot of that stuff ends up sinking to the bottom. But they do have what Marines need is lots of guns and lots of ammo, and they'll make do with what they have on the island. The real first main detachment is Ichiki's detachment that is sent. They land on the island on August 19th. Now, Ichiki has roughly a little over 2,000 men, but the Japanese Navy is going, hey, we only have 6 destroyers that we can transport your guys. So do you want heavy weapons? Do you want your cannons? Do you want your anti-tank? Do you want men? So he's like, rather have my men, and I'll send, and they're able to fit about 917 of his troops on 6 destroyers and start sending them towards Guadalcanal. The secondary echelon is going to be coming, and he is ordered to retake the airfield and the encampments there. There is some controversy that, and some data that has come to light over the years, where a lot of people have always thought that Ichiki was told, go get him, and his command was telling him, hey, just wait for everything, then we'll go get him. And Ichiki's going, no, I got him with my 900 guys. Some evidence has come to light where in the past few years, with Japanese archives opening up, with a lot of the translations that are happening now, that are kind of showing that some in the higher command in the 17th Army, the Japanese are saying, go get them and make this happen. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle there, because Ichiki does request, hey, once I take the airfield, can I go take Tulagi as well? So he has no idea that there's a large contingent of about 10,000 Marines. He's going to go up against them with about 900 men. And for him to think that, yeah, he's going to just mop these guys up and head over to Tulagi and just redo all this with 900 guys is kind of goes to show you the cockiness, the arrogance, and it goes to that warrior status, that Bushido code that the Japanese army lived by. And this was a time for the army to shine, because again, everybody had known that the Navy had failed midway. There's a huge rivalry between the Army and the Navy within the Japanese. As a matter of fact, just recently, last week, there was the Army-Navy game that took place here. It's a football game, an American football game that take place. And a friend of mine actually made a social media post, and he posted a Japanese Army helmet and a naval helmet, and he said the real Army-Navy game. And I kind of chuckled at it, because the ferocity between those two groups were just on another level there. And so Ichiki's kind of saying, this is our time to shine. We're going to go get these Americans, and we're going to show them how it's done. And he lands on August 19th with 900 men, and he's about 20 miles. They land him at a place called Taivu Point. And from there, he's got to march about 20 miles to get to, you can see there, Taivu Point down there to the right. Right there, Tanambogo, right there, Taivu Point. Right there. And so from there, he's going to make it all the way down to essentially where you see the Tenaru River, a little bit between the Tenaru River and Lunga Point. That's their objective right in there, which is about 20 miles. So the Marines, because of the Coast Watchers network that are on these islands, are feeding the Americans information. They're watching Rabaul, which is kind of the main hub of the Japanese military in that region, and they're picking up the phone, and because every day the Americans are being attacked by air, by sea, and the Coast Watchers are usually that first warning. They pick the phone up, and they weren't even talking in code at that point. If there was 20 planes, they would just pick the phone up and say 20 headed yours, slam the phone down, and they knew, hey. And by that time, it was always around noon, and they called it Tojo time. It was Tojo time when the Japanese Air Forces showed up. And so we had a sense of these whispers that now this main Japanese force is heading towards the American perimeter, and it is the 1st Marine Regiment that is now going to start digging in along the lines of what they think is the Tenaru River, but it's actually the Ilu River and a tributary off of that called Alligator Creek. So it kind of goes to what you were. So this is, you can see where the Tenaru River is there on the right.
Yep.
And The Japanese maps, and again, we're looking through a lens of 1942, not 1945. There are, the amount of planning that went into D-Day. I mean, we're measuring sand density and soils, and we're doing all this crazy stuff to plan for D-Day. The 1st Marine Division doesn't have this. The 1st Marine Division only comes into existence in February of 1942, and here they are in August. They are the front line of the American response to Pearl Harbor. And so they are given hand-drawn maps. They're trying to find anybody that was on a coconut plantation, any missionaries. They're literally bringing boats up alongside of boats and saying, hey, this guy was a priest on Guadalcanal a few years ago, and they're bringing him over to the ship, and they're just slapping pieces of paper down in front of him and saying, hey, what do you remember? Draw something.
Yeah.
And they're drawing hand-drawn maps, and so the rivers get skewed. So that's why they
and lots of local names and local kind of nicknames for things. And again, the reference you made to Normandy, we have these 150,000 scale maps all the towns there because France has had maps for centuries. So there's a church, there's a road network. You're going to islands that the people who lived there didn't need maps because they just went from there to there and they didn't. So, just addressing the fact that the Marine Division don't even have basic cartography is essential to understand how these battles develop. There's people watching this, who take it for granted that military commanders go in with a portfolio of highly detailed maps, and that is the case in some theaters. It is absolutely not the case in the Pacific. And we've had mentioned already the fact the 14th Army out in Burma, is the enemy over that way somewhere through those 3,000 miles of territory we haven't got maps of. That's the kind of situation we're in. So, yeah. So you've set the scene. Yeah, I'll let you continue this. I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
So, and also too, just a little side note for the Japanese, they're using maps that have been provided by the Navy. So the Navy, in terms of topography, they really don't care. So later in the Battle of Guadalcanal, that will come into play because they're going, wait a minute, I didn't know there was this 300-foot hill here. We just thought this was flat land. So, but anyways, that's another day. But the 1st Marine Division starts digging in roughly a week before the battle that will take place on August 21st. They put two battalions on the line. The 2nd Battalion is really at the mouth of the river, and then they have the 1st Battalion up on the right. So you can see Pollock's 2nd Battalion. They're right there at the sandbar, as you want to, if a lot of people refer to it. And then the 1st Marines are south along the Alligator Creek, and this line stretches roughly about between 2,000 and 3,000 yards. It's a very, very thin line, and because the Marines are not able to make a full perimeter around the airfield. Their job is to protect that airfield at all costs. That is their job. End of story. Keep that airfield and to allow us to land our planes there. And but they don't have enough men to do this. I think probably now would be a good point to talk about one of the Solomon Islands heroes is Jacob Vouza, and kind of a little bit of a controversy or a story. But Jacob Vouza is just a rock star on that island to this day. He has monuments. He's on money. This guy is just again Beatles level fame of the Solomon Islands, and he retires to the island of Guadalcanal. Obviously, the Japanese invade, and there he is in his marine greens, and he loves killing Japanese.
I'm looking at him and going, I wouldn't pick a fight with him. I'm just saying, not a month of Sundays would I pick a fight with him.
No, he's a very large man. He loves beheading Japanese. There's a lot of photos. I didn't provide any of those photos where he's smiling with severed heads of the Japanese. He hated them. He loved the Americans and he loved the Marines. And the narrative, the contemporary narrative that you see this come along social media a lot. People, I see it a lot, and so the story goes is that Vouza is walking essentially towards Ichiki's men. He's captured in a village because they find an American flag on him, and the story goes is that he is tortured. He's tied up, placed on an anthill. They bayonet him, and he refuses to tell where the Americans are. The Japanese leave him for dead. He then chews through his ropes and his bindings and runs ahead in front of the Japanese column and goes to the American lines, warns the Americans, and the Americans are able to establish a defense at the last minute, and this battle is going to be won. That's the contemporary narrative that a lot of people go by, and it's a great story, but it didn't really happen that way. I have been very, very fortunate in my life, again, to travel to some of these places. I've traveled to Guadalcanal a few times. I've spent about a total of about a month on the island. I've been able to meet Vouza's family, as well as there's another gentleman that really has done so much, and he's an Australian, for the history of the Guadalcanal campaign in the 1st Marine Division. His name is John Ennis. He had recently passed away. But John was able to really get the true story from Vouza's family. And they actually had recordings of him telling what really happened. And to me, the real story is actually kind of better than this tale that has been displayed. And really what ends up happening is the same thing. He comes across Ichiki's men, he's captured, he's found with the American flag. And Vouza's a very smart man, and he's kind of eyeing this up, going, this isn't a raiding party. This is a large enemy force. He knows that the American lines are very sparse. He knows where they're dug in at. Now the Japanese they do torture him a little bit. They do stab him, but Vouza kind of goes, hey, I'll talk. I'll tell you where they're at, and I'll tell you where they're the weakest at. And says they're the weakest at the sandbar. They're the weakest at the mouth of the Ilu River, and essentially tells them the exact opposite of what they need to know. And Vouza ends up directing these Japanese right into the slaughter pen. It's then he then is then taken prisoner up to the front lines, and when the battle erupts, he then escapes. And there's a Marine Private Wilbur Bewley sees this man coming through the dark through the creek, and Bewley pulls his rifle up and says, "Hands up! Put your hands up, and stop where you are, or you're a dead son of a bitch." And Vouza in broken English is going, me no Japanese, me no Japanese. And they end up getting him to a medic station. They actually have to give him a blood transfusion there because he's lost so much blood. And that he is very proud of that, because he always says that he was half American. Because he had so much American blood.
And I like the idea. Firstly, we love new evidence. We love different versions of things, but also I'm going to sort of throw it out there that he's you just said he's intelligent, but I'm assuming the Japanese kind of think all the locals are just idiots. They don't know what they're doing. Very easy to kind of manipulate, and so that he spins them a story. Me know where Americans are bad, and they just buy it. Because they don't question that he's clever enough to actually double cross them, and exactly. I say that to me makes him a better hero, because he's absolutely. It's not just a physical trick. He hasn't just wriggled out and escaped. He's actually fooled the fuck out of them by playing on the fact they think he's a grass skirt wearing idiot kind of thing,
right?
And actually he's really savvy and he's tricked them, and that's a better story.
Absolutely, and he for his actions for the battle, he'll actually be awarded the Silver Star. And he'll be promoted to the rank of Honorary Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. And they actually bring him later in life. It's actually during the Vietnam War. I actually have photos of him holding an M16. And when he eventually dies, he's buried in all of his Marine with his medals. Wow. That was the proudest thing that he could ever accomplish. And he ends up helping the Marines throughout the entire campaign. He's at their disposal, fighting side by side. He's organizing a lot of the locals as ammo bearers, stretcher bearers, and they are really an important part of the American victory on Guadalcanal. So the Solomon Islanders has a lot.
And just, I know I'm interrupting you now. We're going to go into the battle, but Marion Walters is watching. They ought to be watching, and Marion is saying, "This is a general question. How do the Islanders look back on that period now? You know, with regret, with anger, affection, and who is the anger and the affection directed at? Is the affection still for the Americans today? And I'm guessing it is."
Yeah, absolutely. The history there, I mean, obviously, they gained their independence. They're now an independent nation.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure a lot of things out. They definitely have affection towards the Americans. When we go there, as a matter of fact, I think the people they hate the most right now are Australians. From my experience, once they hear me speak, I've had a few run-ins way out into the jungle, and they want to hear me talk because if I talk with an Australian accent, they don't like it, and that's due to other things not taking place during the war. But they obviously have a pride for the Americans that fought for essentially their independence, their freedom, because they were an occupied nation at that time. So definitely they look back on it, and again, the history is kind of dissolving, but there are a few people there that are really trying to preserve a lot of these battlefields.
And I think I like the fact you refer to them as a nation, because I think we tend to think in Europe, again, the European connection, we think of the French. I think when we think of the Pacific, we kind of think of the islanders as being kind of irrelevant to the story. They're just kind of in the way, getting enabled. And actually, these are fiercely independent nations and communities who have as much invested interest in the outcome of these things as well, and fought for whichever side they fought for, with whichever levels of passion and commitment. You can talk about the Philippines, everything. So I think to give them some credit for being part of the influences as well as just being the victims by circumstance of battles. They are there, they're involved, and it's their history as well. Shared
absolutely
history. So let's get so the Marines are dug in. The Japanese have been misdirected as to where the strength is. It's about time we kind of got to the battle. Do we want to throw up that photo as well? The aerial photo with the annotations on it, I think, is a good one as well.
Yeah, the one with the
which Brian prepared for us. Here's one he made earlier. So blue is American, red is Japanese, basically.
Yep, and if you can see down right
as well.
So right now that's the current. This was current day. As a matter of fact, when I looked at the date of this data from this satellite footage on Google Earth, I was on the island when they took this, so I started getting concerned that I was being tracked. But I looked, I was like, wait a minute, I was there on that date. But that the airfield wasn't there. This obviously has been extended up there, but it's still called Henderson Airport. It was called Henderson Field during war. They still maintain that name, and it was named after Lofton Henderson, who was a Marine aviator that was killed during the Battle of Midway. That's where the naming comes from. And as you can see, there's the red is the generalized approach, and I purposely make that bigger, that bottom arrow red, because this is where the concentration of the troops are going to be at, partially because of Vouza, and partially because Ichiki's just directing everybody, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, we've kind of looked at this. A lot of historians look at this and they can't quite figure out why he would pick that spot to attack, because you have nowhere to go. You're just stacking guys up on that sandbar. And then on the night of August 21st, 1942, this attack proceeds. And the Japanese, and this will be considered the first real large land engagement between American forces and Japanese forces. And where it's a level playing field at this point. And so who's going to win out? Marine willpower, firepower, or this Japanese invincibility theory, and this is what takes place. I think, do you have that aerial, the August 12th aerial? That
August 12th. There we go. Yeah.
So this is a really great aerial photo. This was taken on August 12th, 1942. So this is roughly about 9 days before the battle. You can see the sandbar there. You can see that this is essentially coconut grove. This isn't jungles. This area here is coconut plantations. When you're there, it reminds you of the Ardennes a little bit, because you have these rows and rows of
cultivated trees.
Cultivated trees, and you can see down them. And it's very, very eerie because the depth perception kind of plays on you. And so the Japanese, this is where they attack. They are attacking with roughly about 800 of the 900 guys that they sent. On the line is roughly about 914 within the 1st Battalion, and about 800 or so in the 2nd Battalion. So it's almost a 2-to-1 swing that they're going up against. And the battle takes place. Now, if anybody has seen HBO's The Pacific, this is at the end of episode 1, this battle. So if you haven't seen it, or you want to go rewatch it, this is the battle that we're talking about. Now, the battle in the series kind of takes place where it's just this eruption of gunfire. But actually, which is oddly enough, talking and reading a lot of Marine accounts of the men that were there, the first kind of wave is walking across the sandbar with their rifles slung on their back, and they get tangled up in the barbed wire, and they come to this oh shit realization, and then flares start shooting up, and then they're going uh-oh. And what's facing them, the main kind of toys that the Marines are showing them are the water-cooled, the Browning 1917, the M250 cal, and the 37 millimeter anti-tank gun, which is firing this here. This is what's called a canister round, and this here converts that anti-tank gun into a giant shotgun, essentially. And inside of this is 122 of these things.
I love a nice show and tell, Brian. This is good.
Yeah. I hate when my kids ever have to want to take things to show and tell. I'm gonna have to go, yeah, not now. You're not gonna
not yet. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Japanese are just running into these anti-tank guns that are just blowing just holes into them, and these water-cooled machine guns that are just firing into them at a rate of about 600 rounds a minute, and are just decimating this first wave that's coming across. They start stacking them up on the beach, and the Japanese kind of retreat for the first time, and they're kind of going, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to run, and they were supposed to, these Americans can't fight. What the hell is this? And so now the company commanders are kind of getting together going, what do we do? Usually we've never had to really pull back and go back.
We always win this. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they kind of got to go to the manual.
This isn't in the script. Yeah. This isn't in the script. You're meant to run away now. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So they then start to fan out, where they kind of are taking it amongst themselves to say, hey, let's start fanning out a little bit. But the main orders are, again, to attack that sandbar, because Ichiki's going, well, hey, the Islander guy said that's where the weakest at, so let's keep hitting them there. You guys are lying. And these guys are going, no, you do not understand. We just lost 100 guys right out of the gate. And so they start now attacking the main portions of the line. So this battle is taking place in waves. And they actually do start to get across. And this is really what's concerning to the Americans is that they're actually making it across the river. They're making it into Marine lines. They've taken out the anti-tank guns on the sandbar. They're able to start getting across. This really isn't depicted in the Pacific. They actually do make it across. They take out the guns. They start hand-to-hand combat. And one of the bigger stories is this H Company machine gun crew that is comprised of Leroy Diamond, Al Schmid, and Johnny Rivers, and have their there's Diamond. Diamond's the machine gun crew lead, and he's and his main gunner is Johnny Rivers. And if you bring up the photo of Mr. Rivers, Rivers was a native. He was a foster child. You could see he was of Indian descent.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that he was his father. There's not a lot about it, but they think more of like a South American ethnicity that he had, and was just very revered among the men that he served with. And he's the main gunner, and he is killed as he takes a round to the head. He is killed, but he when he slumps over the gun, his hand stays on the trigger and actually rips off the entire belt and is killing Japanese as they're coming across. So even as a Marine that's been killed in action, he's still taking enemy with him. Yeah. And so Albert Schmid here was the assistant gunner. He now gets on the gun. Diamond gets in, and it's around one of the counterattacks that a grenade is thrown into the pit. It blinds Schmid, and Diamond has most of his hands destroyed. So now they're thinking to themselves, what do we do? Because now I can't see. And they come to this plan and said, and Schmid goes, well, hey, I have good hands. You have good eyes. You tell me where to shoot as they're coming across the river and coming across the sandbar. And so Diamond is sitting there saying, 5 degrees to the left, 5 degrees to the right, keep firing. And then they're, and just because they're so well-trained Marines, they're able to reload this gun. I mean, Schmid is able to reload with really no eyesight. And they're able to hold their position for this action.
Just to interrupt, there's a movie about this, isn't it, with John Garfield as Schmidt, about him.
Yep.
I forgot the
Pride
name
of the Marines.
Pride of the Marines. Yeah.
Yep.
45, 46, maybe just after war, wasn't it? And it's to be honest, it's more about his therapy after the war and the romance and stuff than it is. But it does have the battle in it, and it does show it reasonably well in a kind of a Hollywood way, but yeah.
Right. For 1940s, I've enjoyed it, and I think it really touches on a lot of that kind of psychological effect that this has on the men leaving there, which is taboo at the time. I mean, it is.
Yeah, I mean, and it comes in that era when they made Best Years of Our Lives, when they were tackling PTSD and getting, which they kind of stopped again after about the late 40s. They went back to the rah, the go for broke, and the battle cry kind of films. But there was that little phase just after war where they did address that going back with injuries, going back with psychological problems was something. But then they gave up on it, and they've started again now. But anyway, we go off on I love going off on war movie tangents. But yeah, definitely watch that. Pride of the Marines. Find it and have a watch.
Right. It's a great movie. They're awarded the Silver Star for their actions. So that's kind of one of the many heroic efforts that are taking place by the Marines, and this is really happening along the line. Robert Leckie, the one thing in the Pacific, they really focus on Robert Leckie. His machine gun. He was in 1st Platoon H Company. He's right before the battle. His machine gun position is moved up further to the right, past Schmid's gun. So he wasn't as close to the sandbar as is depicted. It's Schmid's gun that's doing a lot of that damage along the sandbar. And I think I have a photo, current day photo that I took from what we approximate to be Schmidt's machine gun position.
Yeah, I was going to say we should show some of the modern photos now to give an idea to people of
Yep.
it is more open than I thought it was going to be. The movie kind of conveys it much more kind of covered in and dark, and it's like a more tighter jungle. It's it's more open than I thought it was. But that's where you think the machine gun was.
Yes, this is where again, this was John Innes that I referred to. Did a lot of early excavating in these areas, and based on kind of the maps and where they've placed those guns and historical references, has found just tons and tons of piles of 30-06 brass, indicating that there's a machine gun there. But I believe that the series did a fantastic job portraying it, because if you look at that aerial shot from August 12th, there is it was very, very close. A lot of those trees reached right up to the riverbank, but obviously, again, it's been cultivated, farmed over the years. There's residences going in there now, people living on it, building things. So, but we're still very fortunate that there is a sandbar there. So this is a great shot. This actually would have been where the 37 millimeter anti-tank gun section would have been, firing down the sandbar. Now, as anybody could imagine, in the Pacific, they get tons and tons of typhoons and storms that shift the landscape there. But for the most part, this is kind of where the sandbar was, and that would have been a viewpoint of looking down that sandbar. And again, there's another viewpoint in the grass, kind of over. You could see the sandbar down to the left, but all of that on the opposite side of the bank where the photos being taken, that would have all been coconut trees.
Yeah.
And the Japanese would have been using for cover. So this is, this is happening. This is another great shot. I believe this was taken on the 18th or 19th.
Yeah.
Another great shot. So you can kind of see the landscape. There's the sandbar there. This is, and then all to the right there would have been where, this is where Ichiki's men would have been coming through this end. And as you can imagine, it's a resounding American victory. Of about the 800 men that are sent, about 700 are laying dead. That's kind of where the story stops at. There is a effort with General Vandergrift and the commanders of the First Marine. These are actual photos that were taken. I believe this one was actually taken from a movie, a real still, but you can just see the carnage and again, Americans have never seen anything like this before. You have Marine commanders that have fought in the interwar years in Nicaragua and have faced some enemies and seen some battle and never seen anything like this. That next morning, the Marines are saying, "Hey, we can get these guys. Let's envelop them." There's a famous photo you see a lot back there, actually. So in a far, probably about move over to the left. You're right over to the left. Move it over to the left. Let's stop right there. You see that Amtrak there? There's an Amtrak right in those trees. That was actually one of the first aid stations. That was a location of the first aid station. And then I have a photo. It says 2015 now, where it's taken in that same direction.
Yeah, I'll just get that.
That's a good shot. So that's that photo that you just had. This is kind of looking in that same direction. So that Amtrak would have been over there, and this would have just been all those Japanese dead laying there. So that's a nice then and now. The First Marines end up sending Lieutenant Colonel Cresswell's 1st Battalion across the river into the coconut grove to do cleanup efforts. Now, again, I don't know about everybody else, but if I've just watched 700 of my fellow soldiers decimated within the Japanese army, I think I would be pretty well going, this is time to head back home. And this is where, again, the Americans are seeing this for the first time, the ferocity. And one of the stories in here is Company C. Company C is commanded by a gentleman, Captain Nikolai Stevenson. And Stevenson men start taking fire. One of his platoon leaders gets shot, and they notice what looks to be a machine gun emplacement in these coconut logs. And he starts seeing his guys getting taking fire, and doesn't know why he did it, but he orders a bayonet charge. He orders all of his platoon leaders to fix bayonets and says, we are going to charge this. Now, again, if you're this machine gun crew and these string of Japanese soldiers, you're going, okay, I got an entire Marine rifle company charging me with bayonets. I'm going to head the other way. To the surprise of the Marines, the Japanese themselves fix bayonets and charge into Stevenson's men, and it turns into what is a almost something out of Gettysburg or the Civil War. There's this huge clash, and Stevenson recalls just hearing the bone crunching cracks, the rifle butts to the heads, the stabbing, the cries. The Marines come out on top. Now, again, you would think to yourself, this would be the end of it. But Stevenson is standing there with one of his corporals, and one of the Japanese soldiers rolls over, and the corporal yells out, "Grenade, grenade." They're able to jump out of the way. The grenade explodes, and Stevenson at this point goes, enough of this shit, and walks over, puts the 45 to the guy's head, and then starts ordering his men, stab and shoot every single one of these guys. Do not render aid to any of them. And this is that kind of inception point of this is what we got to do.
It sets the tone, doesn't it? It sets the tone, and this is it's going to have it. And it's not that we want to do this. It's just this is how it's going to be. Yeah, these guys are not going to give up. They're not going to play by the Tennessee maneuvers game rules. So just do what we have to do. I'm just, while you're talking about, I don't know whether folks this will work. We've got some footage, drone footage here. Whether my internet connection will hold with this, I'll start playing it. Brian can keep on talking over it. It may judder, it may just, I don't know. We'll see, but I'll attempt to play this footage and we'll see what happens basically.
Yeah, this is, hopefully this works. This was actually taken by a gentleman in Australia. His name is Michael Holmesby. He is a Australian native that has spent time on the island and has taken this drone footage across the island. Just phenomenal footage of kind of showing what this terrain looks like, and today, but again, not a lot has changed other than there's not 1,000 Japanese charging across the sandspit, but it kind of gives you a really good view of the sandbar. You can see from my photos and how the sandbar in this footage is has expanded, because again, just the flooding and everything that takes place. But yeah,
it appears to be juddering a bit, but yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be perfect, but yeah.
It gives a good sense of just from a little bit of a heightened perspective from that. Yeah. Another instance, actually to the left of this drone footage, this is where all of this action is happening with the 1st Battalion. There's actually another instance with D Company. His name is Private Don Stiles, and as he's going through the coconut grove, he sees a Japanese soldier that is taking fire. Stiles is able to wing him in the arm. And again, you would think, okay, I just wounded this guy. He may go, okay, I give up or turn and run. He proceeds to then watch this soldier take his bayonet and disembowel himself right there. And again, just they're going, what is this?
Yeah.
And this again, and behind them, what's happening here on the sandbar, and this is again depicted in the Pacific, is the Marines are coming out, Navy corpsmen are coming out, trying to render aid to wounded Japanese. The Japanese are either trying to stab them, shoot them with pistols, blow them up with grenades, and Marine commanders are sending runners back. And this is where we're not dealing with this. You're gonna do this. We're gonna have to take drastic measures. Don't render aid to them. Bayonet them. Make sure that they're dead, because you don't know if they're going to be booby trapped. They're going to try to take your life. So this is some of the stuff that's, again, looking through that lens of 1942. This has never really happened before, and is again setting that tone for the rest of the Pacific War.
And frankly, it only gets worse, doesn't it? You get to the Okinawa and the Philippines towards the end, and the savagery gets worse. It's different types of savagery, but it doesn't ease off. It just continues at the same unrelenting, level it had started at. And it's hard for those of us who focus on the European theater to kind of just accept just how brutal that campaign is. And as you say, it's always important to look at it through the 1942 lens. And we're not judging. We're just saying it was a very different and brutal war, and that's it. And the people who experienced it, I haven't met as many Pacific veterans as I have European theater, but they have a different way of looking at the war, understandably. And who can blame them? It was just awful out there. So we ought to start gradually thinking about winding things up there now. But you also provide a clip from Victory at Sea as well, didn't you? Which you want to talk about as well.
So I guess people are probably sitting there because, again, when I'm like, okay, well, I don't see why this is important, or why is this so special? Because again, this is happening. This type of battle is going to happen hundreds, if not thousands, of more times over the next 3 years. But again, this destroys the myth of Japanese invincibility. We can beat them. They can be beaten. In 1942, everything is going bad. It's a horrible, horrible year. And this campaign in itself will last 6 months. It's the longest campaign in either theater. It is 6 months of sustained combat, both at land, sea, and air. This is one of the very few, if not probably the only campaign in either theater where you could be a Marine or Army rifleman fighting. There's a sea battle. It's almost like a Call of Duty map page where you're playing, where you got planes fighting each other above you. You got naval battles happening to the right of you. And you're fighting on land, and this is going on for 6 months. And this battle lasts, again, from the total campaign will last from August 7th of 1942 all the way up until February of 1943 until the island.
Some perspective, so 90 miles by 40, you said approximately, Guadalcanal, yeah?
90 by 20.
So 20. So that's going to be sort of the Cherbourg Peninsula-ish. I mean, that's about 40 miles across, about 6, but kind of the Cherbourg Peninsula kind of elongated and narrow, but that kind of area. And that's only a quarter of the Battle of Normandy, which was only 2.5 months. So you're talking twice as long over about 4 times a greater area ish.
Well, here's the thing though. We only fought. Can you bring up that the main map at the beginning that shows Guadalcanal?
Yeah.
Now this is the map, the black and white map, just to kind of give people a sense of really what took place. It's not.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So go from essentially Coley Point right there to the right.
Yep.
From Coley Point, and go over to about Tassafaronga, and then come about 10 miles in.
Yeah.
90% of the battle takes place in there. We never expand across the entire island at all.
Wow.
It is the airfield. Yeah, you can see Mount Austin right there, Mount Austin.
Yeah.
That's really the farthest we're going to go in now, I mean, if there's purists that are watching this, obviously, but for the main part, the whole battle centers around this airfield for 6 months. This is what, and there's an up and down, and this is one of the few battles that I don't think you, myself, or a lot of people out there would ever think. I don't think there was ever a chance that we were going to lose in Normandy. We were never going to lose the battles of Okinawa, the battle
once
of Iwo
we're there,
Jima.
once we're there,
Once we're in, it's just whatever it takes. Guadalcanal is one of the few battles that
could have gone.
American planners are actually going, we may have to abandon it. There's actually talks of, do we go to the table with the Japanese? So there is a big fear in America. And I think if people have ever seen it, Victory at Sea, and I was just kind of leading up into that importance of this battle. In the 50s, NBC produced this epic TV saga at the time called Victory at Sea. And this was the ending to the Guadalcanal episode. And just listen to the words. And I really think they strike home. And I think really.
Hopefully it doesn't judder too much. We'll go.
Pacific Ocean areas flies down from Pearl Harbor to pay what small tribute is within man's province. If there was horror and ferocity, there was also courage and self-sacrifice. If there was death, filth, and disease, the Marines turned the tide of war and stopped their enemy. The Japanese will advance no further. As the surviving Marines wave goodbye, one of the greatest tales of heroism slips out of focus into history. To these men go the honors accorded the Greeks at Thermopylae, the colonials at Valley Forge, the British at Waterloo, and now the Americans at Guadalcanal.
Yeah, kind of says it, doesn't it? Yeah.
It truly does. I think that it's at that time in 1942, and I think again the Pacific. I'll kind of give a nod to that series at the end of that second episode when the men are on board. Lecky and his guys are sitting there drinking the coffee, and the one guy says, "Hey," he's like, "Have you ever even heard of this place?" And he goes, "Everybody's heard of the 1st Marine Division at Guadalcanal." And he's like, "You guys are on the front page of every paper in America. You guys are heroes." And it's kind of like, what? It was, everybody was hanging on the words of all that. And back at home. And before we go too, I just wanted to just kind of take a nod to just acknowledge a few people that I think have just contributed to the history of this battle. One of them being Richard Frank. Richard Frank authored arguably the most comprehensive book on the Battle of Guadalcanal. It's literally called The Definitive Account. It's usually it takes into account the air war, the ground war, and the naval war. The other person is John Ennis. The late John Ennis. Again, I had the honor and privilege spending about 3 weeks with him on the island. There's a little famous quick story with John. John was actually touring the Commandant of the Marine Corps, mind you. This is during the anniversary, and John was bringing American Marine vets back to the island, and John established these. You can go to say, hey, this is Carrington, this is St. Mary Glees. It's very easy to distinguish things in Europe. There, it's kind of like it's jungle.
Green bit, another green bit, yeah.
Right. And so John really established a lot of these locations, and just his love and passion for the 1st Marine Division was just immense. And while touring the Commandant of the Marine Corps, John always referred to the Marines as his Marines. And the Commandant actually stopped him at one point. He says, "Excuse me, John, they're my Marines. And John looked at him and said, "Sir, with all due respect, if they fought on this island in 1942, they're my Marines. You can have the rest." And the commandant basically said, "Fair enough." So John really, and he was one that wanted all of this knowledge to be out there. You and I know very well that the tour guide gigs in Normandy could be ferocious at times. A lot of territorial things. John,
I don't know what you're talking about. No, I've no idea. What? Protective of our stories.
Everybody's, but John really wanted this. He just was hey, I did all this work. It's out there. The other person, the two people, is another Aussie. His name's Peter Flavin. Peter, if anybody has seen anything or looked at anything on Guadalcanal, the amount of work and the research that he's done on the island is phenomenal. And then the other guy and I've met just recently within the last few years, is Dave Holland. Dave Holland was he's an American, was a Marine, and then fell in love with an Aussie girl in Australia, and he actually was doing some work in the Solomon Islands, took some jobs there, and while he was there, really kind of continued what John was doing to a further extent, and really finding Japanese lines, positions, and things like that. And he actually has a YouTube channel that he just kind of posts his videos from the island. It's called Guadalcanal, Walking a Battlefield.
Yep.
He's done some fantastic work. So those are the guys that are really kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of
and it's important to remember there's lots of people do these work. I just want I'm while you were talking, I was thinking of old Tom Clonis as well, TC, who would have liked to watch this show. He was a supporter of World War II TV. He passed away a few weeks ago, and he'd have been waiting for a Marines show. And finally, Tom, it's come, but you're not here to see it. But wherever you are, I hope you can watch it, replay somehow. But yeah, he'd have loved this show. I'd have been getting messages every 5 minutes after saying, Marines. But and just in a serious note, we had a couple of questions coming. One, we will kind of bring it to whole air, but the Great Dominion said, and you talked about the fact that Americans could have lost this battle. He said, did the Marines have a serious plan for shifting to guerrilla warfare in the event the battle was lost? Because it was doubtful that a large-scale evacuation could have kind of taken place. So you might have ended up with sort of cut-off Marines. I mean, have you ever read anything about a potential kind of shift to guerrilla fighting?
The attitude of the Marines were, we're going to win this. And they were going to do whatever was necessary to win. I will acknowledge that, and I know some Marines may cringe when I say this, but the Army had a hand in victory later in the battle. There was actually a lot of Army elements that were fighting side by side with John Basilone in October, the Battle of Henderson Field. Chesty Puller actually gave him the best compliment that he probably could give the Army, and he said they fought like Marines. That was about as far as Chesty Puller was going to go with compliments to the Army. But yeah, I mean, it's
a compliment and also a kind of a it's
a little bit of a dig.
Clever, isn't it? Yeah, good PR. Yeah. You're as good as the Marines. It's like, but you're not better, but you're good as. Yeah, it's good. I like that. Yeah.
But they did. I mean, there was always contingent plans of if they were to be cut off or if they were to break through the lines. And there was a lot of luck involved with that battle because there was many a times that the Japanese could have broken through the lines, but because of their own hierarchy, their command structure, maps, things like that, it just the ball didn't bounce their way, and the Marines came out on top. But there was always that plan was always on the table. Absolutely.
Well, I think we've reached the end of what has been a really enjoyable show from my point of view. So it remains me to say thank you very much, Brian, for doing this presentation. It's been really good. I know Marion is one of my supporters. I had a big chat with her. She's hoping to go to Guadalcanal next year, so I'll get you in touch so you can give us some tips of how the hell she can get there from rural Suffolk and Norfolk and England over to Guadalcanal. In terms of the viewers, please join in with us, what we're doing. Check us out on Twitter and Facebook and our Patreon page. In terms of our next show, I've got a day off tomorrow, and then Monday, it's my kind of Christmas special, I suppose. We've got Peter Lyon on talking about the American Saint Nick. And then hopefully, and Brian mentioned this earlier, hopefully going to be scheduling a Hong Kong special on the morning of 27th with Canadian historian, British historian lives there, and a Canadian historian joining me from Canada. We can all work that out. So that'll be kind of cool. And then we've got the big, then we've got a Pearl Harbor veteran on the 28th. And then, of course, we've got the big Star Wars World War II crossover show on the 29th. So lots of stuff coming up. So please keep in touch. Please check YouTube. Please check Twitter. Please check everything. And I can try and keep you updated with what's going on. Brian, you rank alongside some of the best historians I've had. You're clear. You're concise. You tell the stories with passion, conviction. You know your subject. The fact you've been there, spent a month there in total, that comes through. And I'll have you on any time to talk about more of the Pacific campaign, because it's something we should do more of. So thank you very much, Brian. Have you enjoyed it?
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed it with your armory behind. In case things get rough, you can jump on your armory there and shoot your way out.
I said to myself, I cannot do a show about the Marines without having a BAR and a 1903. It had to be in the shot.
Bit of hardware. Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been great. So happy viewing, everybody. I will see you all again. This is Paul Woodadge for World War II TV saying I will see you all again. I'm ending the stream now. It was brilliant. See you again next week. Cheers. Thank you. Good night.